I, 38M, have been married to my wife Elise, 36F, for almost 8 years now. For context, we met when I was working as an IT consultant at a mid-sized firm. She was in marketing for a luxury brand, and we connected at a corporate mixer. Back then, she was drawn to my ambition. I had plans to start my tech company, and she seemed genuinely supportive. Fast forward to now, and I've done pretty well for myself. My startup took off about 3 years ago, and while I'm not private jet rich, we live very comfortably in an upscale neighborhood. Elise quit her job shortly after we got married, claiming she wanted to focus on building her own business as a lifestyle influencer. That business never quite materialized beyond a few sponsored posts, but I supported her choices. Here's where things went sideways. Last weekend, Elise was hosting a charity gala for her alumni association. It was a black tie event at a swanky hotel downtown. I wrote a check for $15,000 to help sponsor the event. Not a life-changing amount for us, but certainly significant. She spent weeks planning her outfit, getting treatments, and generally stressing about impressing her former classmates. The night of the party, I wore my best suit and drove us there in our Tesla. She insisted we take it rather than my everyday car. As we arrived, I noticed she seemed tense, checking her makeup repeatedly and barely acknowledging me. I chalked it up to nerves about hosting. When we walked in, several of her old friends rushed over to greet her. I stood beside her, waiting to be introduced. That's when it happened. "Oh, this is just my driver," she said with a dismissive wave in my direction. "He can show himself out after he drops off the donation check." I froze. The group laughed awkwardly, clearly confused. One woman glanced at my wedding ring, then at Elise's, her eyebrows raised. But Elise was already moving on, pulling her friends toward the bar, leaving me standing there holding the check envelope. For a moment, I considered turning around and leaving. Instead, I handed the envelope to the event coordinator and made my way to the bar. Throughout the evening, Elise barely acknowledged me. When she did introduce me to anyone, it was as my husband, but with such speed and dismissal that people barely registered my presence before she changed the subject. After about an hour of this treatment, I decided enough was enough. I approached her where she stood with a group of women I recognized from her college photos. I gently touched her elbow and asked if I could speak with her privately for a moment. She followed me to a quiet corner near the coat check, her smile immediately dropping once we were alone. "What is going on?" I asked. "Why did you introduce me as your driver?" "God, you're being so sensitive," she snapped. "These people are important contacts. I don't need them focusing on you instead of me right now." "I don't need them focusing on you?" I repeated incredulously. "Elise, I wrote a $15,000 check for this event. I'm your husband, not an embarrassment you need to hide. You should be grateful I even let you in," she said, rolling her eyes. "Most of these people are from old money. They wouldn't understand your background." She flicked invisible lint from her designer dress, a $4,000 purchase I hadn't questioned. I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't the first time she'd made comments about my middle-class upbringing, but it had never been this blatant. "My background built the life you're currently enjoying," I said quietly, "including that dress, this party, and the house you'll be returning to." "Oh please," she scoffed. "Don't act like I haven't contributed. My connections are why half these donors are here. And who do you think made your house presentable? Your taste was atrocious before me." A waiter passed by with champagne. Elise grabbed a glass and downed half of it in one go, her eyes darting around to see who might be watching our exchange. "Look," she said in a lower voice, "tonight isn't about you or your feelings. It's about making connections that matter. My old classmates are now executives, philanthropists, people with actual influence. If they see me as someone who married down, it hurts my image." The words hit like a physical blow. I stepped back, suddenly seeing my wife with painful clarity. "After 8 years together, that's how you see me? As someone who drags down your image?" She had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "Don't be dramatic. You know I appreciate what you provide, but different circles require different presentations." She touched my arm in what I suppose she thought was a conciliatory gesture. "Just enjoy the open bar and mingle with the tech people if you can find any. I need to get back to my friends." Before I could respond, she was gone, gliding back to her group with a dazzling smile that never once appeared when she was talking to me. I made my way to the bar and ordered a scotch, neat. The bartender gave me a sympathetic look that suggested he'd overheard at least part of our conversation. "Rough night?" he asked, sliding my drink across. "You could say that." I took a long sip, welcoming the burn. "For what it's worth," he said, leaning in slightly. "I heard you're the one who helped fund this shindig. Pretty cool of you." I gave him a tight smile. "Thanks." As I nursed my drink, I observed Elise from across the room. She was in her element, laughing and touching people's arms, her body language screaming importance and belonging. I couldn't remember the last time she'd looked that animated talking to me. My phone buzzed with a text from my business partner, Mike. How's the fancy party going? Rubbing elbows with the elite yet? I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed, actually, I'm just the driver tonight. Apparently. Mike's response was immediate. WTF? You serious? Before I could reply, I noticed someone approaching. It was an older gentleman in an impeccably tailored suit who looked vaguely familiar. Excuse me, he said, extending his hand. I believe you're Elise's husband? I'm Martin Collier, her former professor. I shook Professor Collier's hand, surprised he'd sought me out. Yes, I'm Daniel. Nice to meet you. The pleasure is mine. I've been hoping to speak with you all evening. He signaled the bartender for 2 drinks. Elise was one of my brightest students in business ethics. Ironic, considering current circumstances. His knowing look suggested he'd witnessed Elise's driver comment. I felt heat rise to my face. I hear your tech company is doing remarkably well, he continued. Something in AI development for healthcare applications? I nodded, genuinely surprised. Yes, we've developed algorithms that help predict medication reactions in patients with complex conditions. Fascinating. I've followed your work since your company made headlines last year. That's why I was confused when Elise introduced you as, well, you know. He paused, studying me. I taught Elise for 4 years. Brilliant mind, but always placed too much value on appearances. I had hoped time would mature that tendency. Our conversation continued, and I found myself genuinely engaged for the first time that evening. Professor Collier introduced me to several people, including the dean of the business school and 2 hospital administrators interested in our technology. By midnight, I'd exchanged more business cards than I had at the last 3 tech conferences I'd attended. During this time, Elise kept glancing our way with increasing frequency, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm as she watched me networking with some of the most influential people at her event. The evening was winding down when she finally approached, slipping her arm through mine possessively. I see you've met my husband, she said to Professor Collier, her voice sticky with forced sweetness. Daniel is so modest about his achievements. Yes, Professor Collier replied coolly. Though from what I gather, he's been introduced primarily as your chauffeur tonight. Elise's grip on my arm tightened painfully. A silly joke that's been completely misunderstood. A joke, I repeated flatly. Right. The ride home was silent until we pulled into our driveway. Elise turned to me, her expression calculated. You're overreacting. It was one comment, and you're acting like I committed some horrible crime. I shut off the engine and stared out the windshield. It wasn't one comment. It was a revelation of how you see me, how you've always seen me. A wallet with a convenient driving service attached. That's not fair. No, what's not fair is spending 8 years with someone who's ashamed of where I came from, while happily spending the money I earn. I finally looked at her. I'm staying at Mike's tonight. I need time to think. You're being ridiculous, she snapped, her composure cracking. Where is this coming from? We had one disagreement. This isn't a disagreement, Elise. It's a fundamental disconnect in how we view our marriage and each other. I packed a bag while she followed me around the house, her arguments evolving from defensive anger to tearful pleas. But something had broken inside me. The illusion that we were partners, equals in our own ways. 3 months have passed since that night. I'm living in my own apartment now, and divorce proceedings have begun. Elise tried everything. Promises to change, couples therapy suggestions, even enlisting her parents to call me. But Professor Collier's words kept echoing. She'd always placed too much value on appearances. The most telling moment came when she realized the divorce would significantly impact her lifestyle. You can't do this to me, she'd said. Not to us, to me. Yesterday, I ran into one of her friends from the gala. She awkwardly mentioned that Elise had been telling people I'd had a mental breakdown due to work pressure. Even now, she couldn't admit the truth. Some days I question if I'm overreacting. Then I remember the look in her eyes when she said I should be grateful she even let me in. That wasn't a momentary lapse. It was a glimpse behind the mask, showing me who she truly believed she was, and who she truly believed I was. I'm not just a driver, and I'm done being grateful for scraps of respect in my own marriage.